forgot to record the nutrition one in March, so we got the record button hit today. Like I said, a few housekeeping things. Please make sure that you are muted throughout so that everyone can hear me clearly. If you do have any questions today, feel free to post in the chat, or you can use like the raise your hand function, or you can just unmute yourself and ask your question. I'm happy to pause and answer any questions that you have. And then we'll also have some time at the end to answer any questions. So today's webinar is food and mental health. So thank you so much for joining. I'm very happy that you all are here. Before we begin, I'd just like to make it clear that I am not a mental health professional. What we discuss in today's webinar is not intended to diagnose or treat any mental health conditions or disorders. A little bit about my background. I have a bachelor's of science in kinesiology and a master's of education in sport and exercise science. I'm also a confidence and stress management coach, and I'm studying for a nutrition certification. I'm very passionate about making health and wellness simplified for everyone, so you don't have to be an elite athlete or have a degree in a health field to understand how your body works and how to fuel your body well with nutrition and to feel your best. So my goal for today's webinar is to just empower you with some tips and some tricks to fuel your body in a way that makes you feel your best. Advance here. There we go. So a few statistics here. This is a study done by Oracle. 76% of workers believe their company should be doing more to support mental health in the workforce. And 78% of the workforce say that the pandemic has negatively affected their mental health. I mean, you are here because you saw a food and mental health webinar, so you're already taking those steps because maybe you, like many of us here, have been impacted by the pandemic and our mental health has suffered. 85% of people say their mental health issues are causing sleep deprivation, poor physical health, reduced happiness, and we're suffering in our relationships with family and friends, and some of us are feeling isolated. So we have a mental health epidemic on our hands. Many of us don't prioritize mental health as the most important aspect of our health. You just want to please make sure you're muted.
Okay.
Thank you. All right. Perfect. All right. So we have, we often think of mental health in terms of mental illness. We've all heard the statistic, and you can see it right here. 1 in 5 people have a diagnosable mental health condition in any given year. But how many of us don't seek professional help and receive a diagnosis? If you look at our friends, our families, coworkers, anyone really in our network, especially within the last year, I'd argue that 5 out of 5 people are working on their mental health. Now more than ever, people just like you are attending webinars, seeking out therapy, talking to friends, talking to coworkers. We're all trying to destigmatize mental health. And in May is Mental Health Awareness Month. It isn't simply about avoiding getting depression or anxiety or OCD. It's about taking control of our lives and taking control of how we feel. We spend all this time focusing on our physical health. We hit the gym, we get our steps in, we drink enough water, we try to eat right, but that's all great and super important, obviously, but what are we doing to build our mental health? So another look at these statistics here is 46% of Americans will meet the criteria for a diagnosable mental health condition at some point in their lives. That's half of the American population will meet the criteria for a mental health condition. And this is related to physical health as well. 37% of Americans are considered obese. 32% are considered overweight. Those two together, it makes up about 70% of the American population is above an optimal weight. So I'd like you all to close your eyes, and we're going to imagine ourselves in opposite world. If everything was going the way you wanted it to, if you were healthy, if you were happy, in this perfect world, what would that look like for you? I'll take a few moments to really think about this. How do you look and feel in opposite world? What kind of foods do you eat? What clothes are you wearing? What physical attributes are different? How do you act with families and friends? What does your career look like? How do you feel each day? Now take a minute or so, go into as much detail as you can in your head. Really get all those details of your opposite world. Now, if you'd like, feel free to post in the chat and share just a few things that are in your opposite world. So for me, my opposite world, my perfect world is I feel comfortable and confident in my body and with my clothing. So that's definitely opposite of how I'm feeling right now. And I'm lactose intolerant, but yet I still go for that ice cream, even though I know how it makes me feel. So in my perfect world, my opposite world, I'm not eating those foods that make me feel so sick. So please share in the chat. How do you feel? What do you eat? What does your opposite world look like? Take a minute or so here, gather some of these responses. I can't see anything in the chat, so maybe no one is posting, or maybe my computer's frozen.
People are posting.
Okay, so I think it's just my computer's not showing any. Oh, there they are. Okay. Thank you. Yes, don't have to take medication, have energy, feel strong and in control, can eat anything and feel great at your ideal weight, less sugar, feeling great in your skin, stress-free, balance, well-rested, alert, and present. These are all great things. Thank you all so much for sharing. Less stress, yes, more sleep. That's awesome. Thank you all for sharing. Pop this out, get the last few here. Awesome, great comments, thank you. So in our opposite world, some of those things that we're thinking about may not be realistic right now, but that doesn't mean we can't work towards them. This is our opportunity to take control of the things that we can and see if we can make a difference in our lives. So we can make a few steps towards that opposite world. So a little bit about why I'm so passionate about this subject and why I had the idea to have this food and mental health webinar is I've been impacted, like I imagine many of you have, with the events of the last year. I've postponed my wedding. I've lost family members with COVID. I've always been that happy, positive person. And now, the past year, I've kind of seen a different side of myself where I'm now forced to look at the world through a different lens. And maybe I'm currently struggling with feeling lonely or hopeless and frustrated about what I see and the people I'm interacting with. And so this is a great opportunity to take a moment and look at how we want our world to be in that opposite world and think of what we can do with those thoughts and feelings. As an employee, you have so many incredible resources at your fingertips with Healthier Together and the Medtronic Employee Assistance Program. So please reach out if you need help. We can guide you to the correct people and the correct resources to best serve you. So I'm going to share some science and data that I think you might find interesting, and some tips and tricks that you can start using right away. So what steps are you willing and ready to take to build your mental health? So nutritional psychiatry is a new field in the health, wellness kind of field. It's new within the last 10 to 15 years. Most research is being done studying the links between nutrition and mental health. Now, it may not seem intuitive at first, that connection, but it's key to understanding the twin epidemics in the modern healthcare, those statistics that I showed before. Even though medical technology and knowledge is better now than it ever has been, both mental health disorders and bad health outcomes caused by poor dietary choices are so extremely common. Diet and mental health are inextricably linked. The connection between them goes both ways. A lack of good dietary choices leads to an increase in mental health issues, and then mental health issues in turn can lead to poor eating habits. So in addition to other treatments such as psychotherapy, medication, other interventions like that, it's being argued that nutritional education and counseling is necessary to stem the tide of these mental issues in our society. And the attitude that mental health is separate from physical health is still really prevalent today. So that's why so many people are oblivious to the fact that when mental health is affected, the root of the problem is not solely in our brain. Instead, maybe it's a signal that one or two of the body's connections with the brain has gone awry. So a research study in Spain followed 10,094 university students, so 10,000 university students, over a course of 4.5 years. So at the beginning of the study, they looked at the students' diet and they ranked it. How closely did they follow the Mediterranean diet? So if you're not familiar, the Mediterranean diet is a Greek diet. So with the idea is to consume things like olive oil, fresh fruits and veggies, lots of nuts, seafood. And over that 4.5-year study, the students who adhered most closely with the Mediterranean diet, and this is just in that top half, those who adhered with the diet, they had a 42 to 50% decreased risk of getting depressed. So think about that. Even if that was half true, that's a 25% lower risk of getting depressed by simply adhering to some sort of a Mediterranean diet. So what about people who are already struggling with their mood? A randomized clinical trial, the first ever to look at the link between food and depression and mental health, they looked at with individuals who were struggling with mental health. They were already in treatment. They implemented the Mediterranean diet in addition to their treatment. They had 7 sessions and found that over 12 weeks, 33% of those people went into full remission with their depression. So what foods could psychiatrists prescribe, or what tips could I give you to help simplify and impact your mental health in a positive way? Once again, I'm not saying we can treat all conditions with simply eating fruits and veggies, but how can we be proactive about our well-being? So I'd like to take a refresher. If you were on the March seminar of nutrition, I talked about a concept called nutrient density. So as a refresher, each food has a nutrient density. That's the nutrients per amount of food. So if you think 200 calories may be a bite or two of the cookie, but you're not getting that many nutrients. Whereas 200 calories of kale, for example, that third plate in from the left, if you have 200 calories of kale, that's like a huge giant plate full of nutrients. So we want to fill our plates with those high nutrient dense foods to help us feel more full and help our body function better. So in a few of the studies published that I was just mentioning, researchers found that there's a set of food categories that had the most of these nutrients that are coordinated with brain health. So these are things such as omega-3 fatty acids, B12, vitamin B9, folate, magnesium, and they divided these foods into food categories. So Dr. Drew Ramsey came up with this fun little rhyme called seafood, greens, nuts and beans, and a little bit of dark chocolate. And that's the easiest way for me to think about it when I am thinking about foods that are rich in these nutrients that are associated with brain health. Now, if someone were to come up to me right now and say, Anna, you need to eat more watercress, anchovies, and cashews, I'd say, no thanks, I'm good. Like, this is not ideal. I will not eat those. But if we break it down into these broad food categories, you can think more broadly about these steps that you can take to feel better. And you can try, maybe your only thought of fish you've ever had is like maybe some fried shrimp. Maybe then you switch to having shrimp and then you try that. And then you go to branch out, maybe have a salmon fillet. And then maybe you can go to more of the things that people sometimes get weirded out about, like anchovies or sardines or mussels, oysters, that kind of stuff. All these are super rich in nutrients that are associated with brain health. So we can try adding in more of the seafood, greens, nuts, and beans into our diet. So women in college who eat 2 servings of seafood per week have a 25% lower risk of getting depressed. Women who eat more fish during pregnancy are 6 times less likely to get depressed in the postpartum period. Researchers took this kind of data and they decided to do another specific study. They took 100 students with depression and bad food habits, and they gave them a box of food with things like olive oil, nuts, leafy greens, and they showed them a video explaining why it's important to eat those leafy greens and seafood and nuts. And they found that over just 3 weeks of trying some of these foods into their diet, their stress, depression, and anxiety scores dropped by 30%. Just by having the education on maybe implement some of these foods into your diet, their scores dropped by 30%. So changing diet seems to profoundly influence our brain. And it's not as simple as add some more blueberries and eat a piece of salmon. It's about developing a relationship with food. We're trying to have a foundation be possibly these food groups and these food categories, and then you can sprinkle in that other stuff that we all love. So another simple way to look at this is by taking a look at your plate. You want to create a rainbow with your foods. I'm sure a lot of you have heard this in other nutrition talks or other programs you may have been in, that foods that create this rainbow typically are associated with those nutrients that have good brain health. You can think of it as a brain bow. So you're trying to influence your brain health by eating lots of different foods that are lots of different colors because they have those different nutrients in them. And once again, take that challenge and build mental health and try to get towards that better version of you. Thinking of that opposite world, that's not going to happen overnight, but eventually we can slowly boost our foods up and try to switch from having a ton of butter to maybe using olive oil, or like we talked about in the last seminar, rather than having guacamole store-bought, maybe you have an avocado. So it's just making those small little switches. So why nuts, you might be asking? And nuts are, aside from them being just an awesome crunchy snack, they actually contain a very special fact about them. There's a special molecule in your brain called BDNF. It's brain-derived neurotropic factor. And this protein promotes the survival of our nerve cells. They play a huge role in growth, maturation, and maintenance of these cells in our brain. And nuts are also a great source of vitamin E, fiber, magnesium, phosphorus, and a whole bunch of other great things. And they're loaded with antioxidants, which I'll go over that in a little bit. So one study, it's the only study that's ever been done to look at BDNF levels and the relationship to food. They found that when they added nuts into the diet of their participants, there's a protection against getting severely low levels of BDNF. So this is that factor that seems to help your brain grow and repair. So by adding in those nuts, they helped those BDNF levels stay at an appropriate level, and which spawns the birth of new cells, which we all could use some more brain cells, right? And so why beans? Now, there's a lot of research being done right now talking about the science of brain health and the impact that your gut has on your brain. So a few benefits of eating beans would be they're rich in protein, folate, fiber, iron. I put fiber on there twice, so definitely fiber, antioxidants, and it's good for heart health. And so a lot of research that's been going on right now is the study, once again, connecting the gut and the brain. So this kind of brings me to our next topic of the gut microbiome. Before we move on, does anyone have any questions right away on anything I've discussed so far? I'm going to try, my chat keeps going somewhere different. All right, I'm just going to pull up my chat here and read some questions. All right, I've got a few individual questions on quantity of nuts. I love them, but I certainly eat too much of them. You probably do not eat too many nuts. I'd have to look at the exact recommendations, but over the course of a week, you'd want to eat, I believe, I'll have to double check on this, but I'm pretty sure it's 5 cupped handfuls a week of nuts. So, I mean, cupped hand is like a cup. So that's, a decent amount of nuts per week. So I think you're probably fine. And you can't really eat too many of them also. All right, these are all great questions. And there's a chance I'm not going to know all these off the top of my head. So I will definitely save the chat and then send everyone individual messages to answer these questions. Nuts, are some better than others? I don't think so, not from what I've read. They all have different nutritional value. So it's really finding the nuts that taste best to you. Like I hate cashews and I will never eat them. So I like almonds, and I'm trying to mix in a few other different types, and especially seeds as well. Yeah, great questions. And I'll come back to this as well at the end. So talking about the gut microbiome, it's this long distance relationship. So the gut microbiome is everything from our mouth to our colon, from entry to exit, and then everything that's in between. So our stomach, our small intestine, our large intestine, and all of the little critters and bacteria that live inside our stomach. Bacteria, fungi, viruses, and cells. There's trillions of these little critters that are living in there. And diversity is so important in the gut. So you have all sorts of types of bacteria that live in there. Some are specialized to digest fats and meats and oils. Some are specialized to digest fruits and veggies, carbs, and you need these diverse species in there. Now, if you only eat foods that are high in fat or extra processed, you can actually train your system, and your gut will produce more of that bacteria to digest high fat foods. So that would lead to a skewed microbiome towards those bacteria that digest fats. Now, it's definitely reversible. However, it takes quite a time to achieve that healthy gut, and the body tries to generate the right building blocks, even if you've damaged your gut. And so what makes a healthy microbiome is the diversity. Just checking out the chat here. All right. So there's a few different things that can also impact your gut microbiome. Those would be antibiotics, and those can completely wipe out your microbiome, but our body is well equipped to replenish and regenerate those bacteria. And then stress can also kill our microbiome. And it is important for long-term health. If you have a healthy gut, you're going to feel more energetic, you'll get sick less often, you'll have better mental clarity, and ultimately you'll have better emotional well-being. But if you don't have a healthy gut, a lot of research is showing that it's related to things like diabetes, autoimmune disorders, mental illnesses, such as anxiety and depression. Much of the research that I've shared comes out from these explorations on how disruptions in the gut bacteria can cause these kind of mental issues. Food influences your brain directly and indirectly. When that food is broken down into fermented and digested materials, its components directly influence our brains. So while your gut and your brain are housed in different parts of your body, they maintain more than just the historical connection that our brain talks to our stomach. They remain physically connected. So there's this cranial nerve called the vagus nerve, and it's the largest of the cranial nerves. That originates in the brainstem, so kind of near the base of your head. And when it reaches the gut, it untangles itself and it kind of forms this net around our stomach. And it also provides the parasympathetic supply to the heart and stimulates a reduction in heart rate. So it's connected to the central nervous system, but also has that parasympathetic supply to the heart. So if you think about if you're stressed, what are the first few things that happen physically when you're stressed? You may get butterflies in your stomach, you may have loss of appetite, digestion issues, and rapid heart rate. So this all would make sense because the vagus nerve goes all the way from our stomach, all of those organs up to the brain, and they really do talk to each other. The vagus nerve penetrates the gut wall, and it plays an essential role in the digestion of food. Its key function is to ensure that those nerve signals can travel back and forth, and it carries all of this vital information. So, does this make sense? How does your body actually transmit those messages between the gut and the brain? So imagine you have a headache and you take a pill for your headache. You usually swallow it so it enters your mouth and it makes its way all the way down to your gut. From there, it is broken down. Now those chemicals from the pill travel from your gut to your brain through your bloodstream. And in your brain, then it starts to decrease inflammation and loosen your blood vessels. So it's the same way as chemicals in that pill. Chemicals produced by your gut can also reach your brain. So if that microbiome is all out of whack, that is going to send those signals right up to your brain. I want to make sure I'm getting any questions here. Does drinking too much diet soda kill off microbiome, artificial sweeteners? There is some research showing that added sugars would definitely impact your gut microbiome. And linked to Poor Gut Health. Thanks, Amanda. There is so much information about the gut. I have a few books that I have listed at the end that I've read and that I found just to be really interesting. And definitely, if you are thinking that you may be out of whack and you're like, oh, wow, this is kind of resonating, like maybe you're just constantly having digestion issues, definitely speak to your physician about this. There are tests they can do of your microbiome. They can inspect the bacteria in your gut and your matter that comes out. They can inspect all of that to determine if things are out of whack, and they can then prescribe supplementation or probiotics. And I'm not going to say, go and get a supplement for this or take a probiotic, because everyone is different and everyone needs to definitely speak to their physician first, but it's a great way to start that conversation. You can have some sort of knowledge in your back pocket when you go and talk to them, like, hey, I heard this, I'm kind of interested in learning more. Can we take a look at that? So definitely something to consider. Thanks for the questions. Yes, definitely super eye-opening information. I'll show you my book recommendations at the end. So a little more nitty-gritty, and then we'll get to some more questions at the end. These are 3 important molecules that kind of explain how all of this works. So we talked about these different types of foods, and it's now how does it actually impact your brain health? So there's a molecule called tryptophan. Now you may have heard of this around Thanksgiving time. Everyone's in their tryptophan-induced coma. Tryptophan is also found in turkey, eggs, chia seeds, whole milk, canned tuna, oats, cheese. So these 3 molecules you get them from dietary intake. So you have to eat these 3 things in order to get them. So your body takes tryptophan and it converts it into serotonin and melatonin, sorry. Serotonin and melatonin. So serotonin is something that makes you happy, it's super important. And then melatonin can help you sleep. So imagine if you don't have any tryptophan in your diet, your body is not able to make and convert into serotonin and melatonin, which would definitely impact your mood. And that's definitely why it's linked to depression and anxiety in some of those studies I mentioned. So another one called tyrosine, you don't have to know the specific numbers. It's just this kind of the reasoning behind why you should have more nuts and that kind of thing. So tyrosine is an amino acid found in foods like almonds, lentils, and seeds, and edamame. And so tyrosine, when it's broken down in your gut, it converts into dopamine and epinephrine. So dopamine, it motivates you to do things. It's an initiative-oriented behavior that helps you to propel into action, motivates you. And then epinephrine is your fight or flight molecule. Now imagine if you didn't have high levels of epinephrine in your body. If you were walking down the road and all of a sudden a mountain lion popped out at you, like it's very likely that's going to happen. Maybe if you're in like Big Sky, Montana or something. So like mountain lion pops out at you, then that fight or flight tells you what to do. Or even if you're giving a presentation at work, you need that epinephrine to understand, when you have to be on and to have that energy that is necessary. And the last one is called indole-3 lactic acid. I'll refer to it as ILA. Now this is super important. Your body takes it in, and there's a certain bacteria in your gut that converts the ILA to IPA, not to be confused with beer. IPA is indole propionic acid. So this IPA is one of the strongest antioxidants in your body. So you may have heard what an antioxidant is, so I'll explain it a little bit more detail. So your body has a variety of chemical processes that have to happen. Many of them create these things called free radicals. So these are these reactive species that are just running around and they're damaging your cells and your DNA. Ultimately, it can lead to things like cancer and inflammatory diseases. So these antioxidants that are in all these foods we're talking about, these antioxidants come in and they break down your free radicals to keep you healthy. So that's why it's important to have those antioxidants. Now, eating these foods is necessary to keep you healthy, but it's not sufficient. A healthy microbiome is needed in order to make those necessary conversions happen in your body, so you can take in food, digest them, and spit out those other molecules that impact your mental health. So what can we do? There's a few ways to improve your gut health. One could be adjusting your diet. Like I said, implementing more of these types of food categories, more seafood, greens, nuts and beans, and a little bit of dark chocolate. Make those simple swaps. It doesn't have to be all or nothing. You don't have to say, I'm only eating these foods. It could be as simple as switching from your iceberg lettuce in your salad to maybe getting one of those leafy green mixes. And that just simple change increases the amount of nutrients you get just in one meal. So small little challenges to boost your foods up. And like in a yogurt, if you want some granola on top, throw in a scoop of chia seeds or sunflower seeds, pumpkin seeds. And it doesn't have to be every single meal you do all these crazy things. It could be so simple, like a scoop of chia seeds. Another thing you can do to improve your gut health is incorporate mindfulness and exercise. And you all are here, so you all are clearly interested in this topic, and you're probably very familiar with some of these resources because you found this. But utilizing all the resources on Healthier Together, the Will mindfulness tool, journeys, utilizing the YouTube channel for classes, quick tips, guided meditations. As we've talked about, everything is linked. So if we're less stressed, that can help our gut act the way it's supposed to and digest how it's supposed to, so we can get those nutrients. And then the last way you can improve your gut health is targeted supplementation. So speak to your physician, like I said, and start the conversation and see if that's something that might be worth pursuing further. So here are the few books that I've read or mostly read. I definitely read the first two, but I used some resources from the second two to help me find these studies that I was talking about. And I'll be posting the PDF of this slide deck to Yammer as well, so you can write these down now or just get it later. I really love This Is Your Brain on Food, and then Eat to Beat Depression and Anxiety. And then Drew Ramsey also has a ton of TED Talks, and he's spoken on Psych Hub and stuff. So that's been really interesting just to learn more about it. So yeah, what questions do we have? And also feel free to unmute yourself. I know that was a ton of information, but I hope that you found it to be helpful. I'm going to stop sharing so I can find my chat because it keeps disappearing on me. So someone said candy needs to be classified as poison. I mean, there's something else to be said for short-term habits that influence your mental health. So the process of cooking your food and the joy that you have of making a new dish. And I mean, that impacts your mental health right away, just because you feel that joy of making your food versus just opening a package or opening a takeout container. And like, there's times when maybe what you want to go towards is some ice cream, and that's totally fine. And like we've talked about in all these other seminars, it's all about balance, right? It's all about noticing how your body feels, recognizing those signals, and then making your best guess and your best choice of what you should eat next. So someone said, where can you access Healthier Together resources? If you go to healthiertogether.medtronic.com, if you haven't registered before, you can register right from there. There's an option like click here to register. And then everything you need is on there listed under programs. And then there's links in like the Yammer community to that as well. Yeah, if you have specific questions about Healthier Together, let me know. So you did not mention wine. What are your thoughts on that? I have no knowledge on wine and alcohol. I did not look into that. I can definitely use a little research for you and let you know. I've heard that red wine is beneficial, but I don't know why, the science behind it. But I'm gonna write down your name and I'll do a little digging. All right, let's see who else has a question that I have not answered. Big difference versus from fresh to canned to frozen. Great questions. So there is a little research done on fruits and veggies and whether you eat them fresh or frozen. I'm more familiar with vegetables, and typically with people's habits, a lot of people buy tons of fresh veggies and then they don't eat them and then they go to waste because you never made them in time. So I'm a high proponent of promoter of getting veggies that are frozen, just because I can keep them in my freezer as long as I want, and then I heat them up or cook them when I'm ready to eat them. So I'm definitely terrible at including them in my diet more. And I believe there's also, it maintains more of the nutrients on frozen veggies. And then there's another more research done on fresh fruits. You may have heard of like the Dirty Dozen. And so those are things like apples. I can't think of any, like blueberries, strawberries, where it's typically better to buy organic just because there's less pesticides. So if you think you're eating the skin of something, it's typically better to buy the organic option. But if you're peeling it like a banana or an avocado, it's better, then you can go with the normal kind. But obviously, I mean, organic is typically more expensive. So go with it, whatever works best for your budget. It's just a few facts. How much is a little dark chocolate? I don't have the specific dietary recommendation, but a few of these researchers that I've kind of been following the past few months, they talk about always having dark chocolate in your house, having dark chocolate in trail mixes, and I don't know what the recommended serving size is, but a little bit of dark chocolate. I mean, like those little, I'm imagining like those little bars, like one of those a day. That's my not scientific recommendation, but having some right now, yes. Canned versus dried beans. And that's another great question. I'm sure there's lots of research on that. I just haven't looked into it that much because the general idea is we don't want to limit ourselves to have all of these great options. So if I say only eat dried beans or only eat canned beans, that cuts off half of or more of the options that you have. So if you can even just add beans into your diet, then that's better than nothing, right? So there's no, as far as I know, there's no research that says, dried beans are going to be worse or canned beans are better. I think it depends on when you look at those options, however, that you look at what else is included in that can. So maybe it has tons of sodium or tons of additives in that can to preserve it. Just keep that in mind, that maybe you're going for the low sodium option or the no added sugar option. Thanks, Ellie. What other questions? And like I said, if I have not answered your question, I missed it, send me an email and I'm happy to do some more research and get you the better information. Someone said they've heard that corn is a fake healthy food. I have never heard that before. What I've learned with my nutrition education is that you want to steer more towards whole foods. So rather than a chicken nugget, you have like a whole chicken breast. Or rather than having potato chips, you would eat a potato. I've never heard of anything about corn being a fake healthy food. I mean, yes, you get access to this recording. Once it's available, I'll post it on Yammer on that same thread. Yeah. Well, thank you all so much for joining. I hope you learned a little bit and you can just do a little digging on some more research. Corn is higher in sugar than other vegetables. Oh, good information. Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Feel free to hop in if you have a question. I'll be here for a few minutes. But otherwise, we are finished with today's webinar. Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Like I said, if you have specific questions, feel free to call them out. Definitely food for thought. I like that, Melissa.